Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine. So, in our previous class, we were discussing about how Sister Nivedita met her master and what were the things she recollects during her first meeting with Swami Vivekananda. That is in St. George's Drive, the place where she, in the parlor meeting which was organized there. So she happened to visit those, participate in those sessions. And that was the first time she had contact with someone who had come from the East with direct spiritual experience. So she was very much struck, as she says, by her dignity, by his dignity, by Swami Vivekananda's dignity, and a serene approach. Perhaps she was imagining how an Indian Vedic rishi would be like. And one or two impressions she says stand out from those first discourses. The first one was the realization of Godhood or truth as the Father, which was deeply ingrained in her personality or maybe ingrained in her mind because of her Christian theological background, where God is always referred to as the Father. But that symbolism, she says, had to be, it just disappeared because after this meeting, the way Swami Vivekananda convinced her that it is just a symbolism. God can, why should God be just the Father? You don't have to take it as an absolute reality. God can be considered as a mother also. So the idea of God as the Father, which was, according to some religions, the ultimate truth, that she says, I had mourned over my own loss of faith in this particular symbolism because she was a Christian at heart. And there's nothing wrong in that. Swami Vivekananda said, you have to look upon this thing in a very universal or a liberal light. So, and she had a desire to study its value of symbolism of the East, symbolism of the West, because every religion has its own symbolism, though it is not the ultimate truth. As Jesus himself said, God is spirit and should be worshipped as spirit, where the form doesn't become important, whether he is a father in heaven or the mother, divine mother, it really should not matter. So, Sister Nivedita says she had a desire or to study its value. Its value means the value of symbolism in our life. Why do we use symbols? Why do Hindus worship God as the Divine Mother and they use these different symbols? The temples have so many idols of images of different kinds of God whom we call Ishta. There are so many gods. So that's why they think Indians believed in a sort of polytheism where many gods are worshipped and each one is true. No, neither is it monotheism, because the theisms which were introduced by the Western theologists led to a lot of quarrel, whether God is one or God is many, but very few people had the courage to see the unity in diversity, that God can be one, God can be without form and also with form. So the symbology doesn't become, it becomes secondary. Truth should be primary. So this was a new idea for Sister Nivedita. So apart from the objective truth or untruth, whatever it may be, symbology, whether it is right or wrong, she wanted to study this further. So that is why there is another book which, Hindu, uh, the footfalls of Indian history, and also she wrote a book on Hindu symbology. What does the different symbols? What are the different myths and symbols? Uh, she co-authored a book with Anand Kumaraswamy, Myths and Legends of the Hindus. It's a very famous book. It was co-authored by her, and there's one great scholar known as Anand Kumaraswamy. When she came to India, she authored this book. So there was a desire after her first meeting with Swami Vivekananda, the way he explained the value or the importance of religious symbols, how much importance we should give to these symbols. Each religion has their own symbology, own myths to which they adhere to. So what is the objective truth or untruth about these things? So that led Sister Nivedita. She says she had a great desire after meeting Swamiji to study the idea, this value, this idea of worshipping God through symbols. What is its purpose? Where will it lead us to? Whether it is objective, it is true objectively, or it is just a untruth. It's just the subjective truth that is important. The supreme formless soul, the pure consciousness. Is it more important, or the symbols outside are important? Because Sri Ramakrishna and his disciple Swami Vivekananda, according to Nivedita, they believed that not only one is true, and the many is also true, but one and many are different aspects of the same reality. Now, this was a very new concept to Nivedita. How can, if you believe that God is one or reality is one, but then it cannot be many. Many should be ignorance. But Vedas, Rig Veda, accepts that Ekam Sat. Sat is one, but sages call it in different names. So, from different perspectives, they may be separate, but the truth is one. But the symbology can be different. At the same time, each can lead to that same truth. This was a new idea. So he says she suspected that such a conception would have its own effect on the character and perhaps on the civilization of those who held it. So she says that explains why Hindus were so liberal. How could they coexist with people belonging to different gods? Because they had no problem. Their Vedas has said, truth is one, let him, but sages call it by different names. So depending on which sage you decide to follow to lead you to the absolute truth, it doesn't really matter whether you worship this form or that form, this god or that god. This was a new discovery for Sister Nivedita. That is the first, and there are several impressions she had about Swami Vivekananda. The first impression she knew was that this is a wonderful idea, and Swami Vivekananda has explained it so nicely. Of course, that is how the master explained. Even Swami Vivekananda, when he went to Sri Ramakrishna, he had this confusion because of his Western education, the modern education, which told them that either you are monotheistic or polytheistic. If you belong to a certain culture, you believe in many gods, you are ignorant. And if you believe in one Father in heaven, you are fine. But Indians questioned it further, said, why should you call him a father in heaven? Call him a mother. There are so many other relationships with God. So she felt that this was a new idea, and that will bring about peace. This idea of unity in diversity was the idea she liked very much. Now, she says, till now I was never thinking, because we people, I mean, she was a very devoted follower of the church. She said, I never had that doubt, because for us, that conception was not necessary, because we were told right from childhood, you worship your God as Father, finished. No other choices were available. So she says, I was unable to do any kind of comparison because there was no material available in the books that she read, where she could compare the different systems, thought trends of other civilizations. But when she came in touch with her master, who for the first time cleared all her doubts, started clearing. Of course, her doubts were not cleared. She had a long tiff with her master. And we saw in our previous class that Swami Vivekananda supported her and said, "Don't worry, I also fought with my master because there were many things which I could not accept. So don't worry, I had to fight my master for 6 long months, 6 long years. Before accepting him fully, I had my own doubts because of the wrong type of education that I had got in my universities." He accepted that. It was because of the lack of liberal education. You have exclusive ideas that this is the only truth. Because powerful people say that this is the truth, then you have to accept it. So a person or a student of a university who believed that there can only be one way at looking at truth is not a true scientist. A true scientific approach, as science does, you prove your theory, that is fine, but just don't shut that book. The book of geography, the book of history, the book of science, and all the biology is not a closed book. It's an open book. People have freedom to do more and more research and correct wrongs if there is some error in the previous reading of nature. Our the study of biology, the theories and the proofs that were given in the past may not hold now. Something new can be discovered and the old will be discarded. So also religion should have followed that approach. If something new or something better, a better explanation. But religion in India, they never threw away the old ideas. Just as we don't throw away Newton's ideas just because somebody has discovered certain higher laws. Newton's law definitely works at lower levels, at the gross level. But at the subtler level, we have higher and higher theories which give. So there are many ways to look at truth. That is a new idea she got. And here was one, when she is referring to her own guru. Here was one, my master, who told us of no less than 5 systems of worship founded on similar personification of the divine idea. Now, these 5 classifications of different deities was done by Shankaracharya. He was an atheist. He should not, but he knew that there are people who would like to worship images and gods. So instead of worshipping millions of gods, he said, he divided worship into Pancha Devata Puja. 5 systems of worship means Pancha Devata Puja. That is what she is referring to. Swami Vivekananda would have alluded to this fact that it was Shankaracharya who wanted to, he did not reject the worship of God of form, though he believed in Advaita. But he knew that people who still want to worship a form, let them not get confused. He reduced the whole system into 5 systems of worship or 5 forms, Pancha Devata Puja. And he insisted that before you worship your God or Ishta, you worship these 5 deities. Who are the 5 deities? They're Ganesha, Ganpatya, they are known as. Then the Shaiva, then there is worshippers of Shakti, worshippers of Vishnu, and worshippers of Surya, sun. So he classified all the Indian worshippers into these 5 Pancha Devata. Surya Devata was the one which is the most ancient. Bhargo Devasya Dhimai. The Gayatri mantra is addressed to sun god because sun was a great deity, a powerful force in our life. So sun was worshipped. They are known as Sauryas. There are still a certain sect still worship only the sun as their god. Then there are people who worship Vishnu, who is the preserver. Of course, there is Brahma, the creator, but we have the concept of Shiva, Shaivites. We have the concept of Shakti or the Divine Mother, the Tantras and all, they follow that Shakti worship. Then we have worshippers of Surya, as I said, and Ganesha. So Ganesha was a deity and it was so much prevalent. In every worship, Shankaracharya said, this Pancha Devatas you worship, just as we begin, before beginning the worship of our Ishta, we are asked to worship Ganesha. We don't worship, but we still worship all the other gods and goddesses. So that was taught to the children right from childhood. But this idea was new to Nivedita because these ideas are not taught in the West. You are just told in a very, very gross way that because you have so many gods, now the young children in the school, even today, after 125 years after Swami Vivekananda, after coming to this country, our Asians get confused. In fact, I met a person, a young person, who said, I like Islam or I like any other religion which believes in only one God because we have lots of gods. So that's why I want to change my religion. So I said, who told you India accepts all the different gods? India is a polytheistic uh, religion. Why do you jump into conclusions? In fact, India believes in no God at all. Why one God? The only pure consciousness, Advaita, that means only one exists. Whether you don't even need a deity to worship. So we have gone beyond even the conception of single God, a monotheistic religion. Monotheistic is equally fanatical as polytheistic, but the concept of many gods, our young children do not know. You have many gods, so yours is an inferior religion. That is the idea which is given. But Sister Nivedita, maybe she also believed, because everybody was told that India is a primitive country, they worship so many gods, it's full of superstition, because there were reasons to believe, because people were not following the true spirit of the country, the true religion as it should have been done. There were many people who were ignorant and were fighting amongst themselves, saying ignorantly within Hinduism that my God is Shiva is superior to Shakti, I will not worship Vishnu. Followers of Vishnu were quarreling. So because of that, the the Westerners got an idea that this land is full of superstitions. And Indians, young Indians, who were educated in the Western method of thought, swallowed it and they believed that this is true. And they started hating their own religion. And it is continuing to this day. Because of lack of proper understanding, the young Hindu children, for obviously no reason, they have been told, when other friends tell them, we have one God, you are confused a lot, you have so many hundreds of gods, and everybody seems. The idea is, the problem is that nobody tells these young kids or even the grown-ups who just swallow this idea. So you can't blame people of those days, especially in Calcutta, the younger generation, lost faith in Hinduism because they were told, if you are told day and night, and if you are not explained this great concept of unity in diversity, which made India a great civilization for thousands of years. Our ancestors knew it, but unfortunately that system of education was destroyed. And our children never knew, they never grew up. I mean, in India in those days, because of the influence of Western education, which is still there. Today also, if you go to the so-called elite of India, who go to so-called modern schools, they think it's a fashion to make fun of the superstitious Hindus. There are people who make fun of the superstitious Christians and other religions as well. I'm not saying that. Every country has some people who make fun of their own religions because of lack of proper understanding. So a Christian who understands Christ, his true message, will never criticize his religion. A Hindu who understands the true spirit of Hinduism will never criticize his own religion. So also, and that is not what Swami Vivekananda wanted to do. He came to the West by saying that Each religion is a different path. That is what his master told him. That is equally valid to the sects which we follow in India, the different sects, people belonging. So Shankaracharya here, Sister Nivedita says, she heard for the first time that to avoid confusion, he said, don't have so many gods, reduce yourself. You may be worshipping any aspect of Divine Mother. So you will be a Shakta. Whether you worship Kali, whether you worship Durga or any other deity, Saraswati, Lakshmi, there are so many deities, feminine deities, they are as different aspects of the same Shakti. So don't quarrel amongst yourselves. At least you are a Shakta, you are a Shaivite, because you worship Shiva in different forms. You worship him in the Shiva Linga, you worship him in some other form. Doesn't matter, but you are a Shaivite. And then there Vishnu also has so many avatars. You worship him as Narayana and Krishna and Rama. They're all avatars of Vishnu. So he says, don't quarrel, worship all the five gods. Finally, you have to accept the highest truth. But don't reject this. And Ganesha, you worship him, Kane worship Surya. So he classified and said, in the beginning of your worship, whether you are worshipping Shiva or the Divine Mother or any other god or goddess, don't worry. Worship these five gods just to give you an idea that don't fight with the other people. Worship all the five because they are all different paths to the same goal, to worship the same Brahman or the same Ishvara, who is the manifest form of Brahman. So whether he manifests as Shiva or Shakti or Ganesh or Surya, doesn't matter. As long as you know that reality is one, sages call him by different names. So then he says, after he explained the idea behind this Pancha Devata Puja, which Shankaracharya introduced, he says he preached a religion which now began with the classification of religious ideas. So he said Hinduism, a system, a dharma, a religion which believes in a graded approach. It's like you want education, you want to do a PhD, but you have to pass through different levels of study. Each are equally important. After passing the primary, you go to secondary school, you go to college, university, then you do PhD. So no matter how high you go in your quest of your knowledge, you have different grades, and each one is true at that particular level. So she says, such was the wonderful personality of Swami Vivekananda, which overwhelmed her, because till now she was mixing with scholars, she was mixing with Bertrand Russell and so many wonderful scholars, the highest intellectual minds of the day. She was, in fact, the Sesame Club was started by her, where great scholars, great philosophers, great scientists used to meet. The Sesame Club, she was one of the co-founders. So that used to be one of the greatest platforms where ideas could be exchanged. So she was well conversant with all the latest philosophies, the modern thought. But unfortunately, what she was lacking was a guru or a master, as she called him, the master as I saw him, who could show her the truth of religion, not just convince her. Her intellectually, she found it difficult to convince, but there was, she says, I was struck by the strangeness or the dignity of this great personality who represented the Indian thought, which I heard for the first time in my life. So she says the very newness of these ideas, which she heard from her master, of these metaphors, the different metaphors which Thakur used to use to explain certain idea. We will be having a gospel class at 8:10. So I need to, that is for our Scotland group. So they have their own Monday class. Once the first Monday of every month, we have now decided, but since it was clashing with our class, we decided to hold it at 8:10. So I will be discussing on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna immediately after this class ends. So this strangeness, this dignity, calm dignity of the Indian ideas, the great Indian ideas, which she had heard, she confesses, I never heard these wonderful ideas. And the metaphors that were used, most of the metaphors which Swami Vivekananda used, he learned from his master, who had a wonderful way of explaining spiritual truth in through his parables, through these metaphors, through these similes. And she says it was a great acquisition for me because she was trying to get convinced. First of all, she was confused. She was not happy with the ideas of religion she had till then. So she studied Buddhism, different sects of Christianity, trying to find out that somehow these ideas are not clear to me. They don't lead to fulfillment. So she wanted some greater, deeper ideas. And the newness of these ideas and metaphors with Swami Vivekananda, along with his dignified personality, which she felt as soon as she saw him, the first idea she got was of a calm dignity. Those who look at Holy Mother's picture or even Swami Vivekananda's meditation pose, they understand that. The calm dignity which comes out of tremendous mental stability, born out of deep meditation. Unless a person meditates, this kind of dignity does not come. And that can be seen, not only seen, it can be felt. So that was, though many of the ideas were new to her, she could not accept everything during their first two, 3 meetings. There was something in the Swami Vivekananda, her guru, who gave her the idea of a loftiness, a dignity, and the wonderful metaphors explaining religious truth so clearly, removing all the cobwebs in the mind. And then she thought, oh, what a great acquisition, oh, what wonderful ideas he has given in this short 1 or 2, 3 meetings. Then she says, one tale she remembers was something new to her. We talk of certain things like trying to see that same God everywhere. That is one thing which Vedanta wants to emphasize. But to a Western mind, it looks like blasphemy. What is this? God is in the church, God is in the heaven, our Father who art in heaven. Those things are primitive ideas, but of even in Indian religion, we believe in a heaven, a God who guides the destiny. But we don't see the idea of God in everything, which all the religions speak of, may not be directly, but indirectly. So when Jesus said the kingdom of God is within you, what did he mean? That he is within, the kingdom is within everybody. When he said you, it meant you means everybody, not just the good people or the bad people. Everybody, the kingdom is within you, but you have to discover it. A saint discovers it, a thief does not discover it, but the kingdom is already within you. The pure consciousness. So people thought that how can this is blasphemous to see that God in a thief. Is it practical? Has anybody seen that? So immediately he gives a tale, he gives a beautiful example of Pavari Baba, whom Swami Vivekananda had actually met. So he told that story because he had heard it. And it was not a myth that he was telling some Puranic stories. He had seen it had happened in India. It may not be in front of his eyes, but it had happened and people had seen it. So he says, for instance, one story which deeply influenced her was that a saint, that is Pavari Baba, here she is not mentioning, ran after a thief. Why? Because with the vessel, he heard the sound of the vessels he had come to steal, and he had dropped them because he felt he will be discovered. He had made some noise accidentally. He was quietly trying to steal some vessels from From he was a poor man. Pawari Baba was just living on a little food items he could get. Whoever came and offered him something, he would eat that. And many times they saw him not eating for several days. Pava Hari means one who ate just air. So such a great yogi who practiced what he believed in, he thought it was a messenger from God who came. He had a few vessels in which he used to cook, and some thief, seeing the open, because he never locked his cave. He used to live in a cave-like structure. So the thief conveniently came in and thought that I'll get, so if I sell these utensils or vessels, I'll get some money. So he was trying to rob it, but then accidentally made a noise and the saint came out. Pawari Baba came out just to see what is this noise. And he saw that thief, he had collected all the vessels, but seeing Pawari Baba coming, he thought I'll be discovered, I'll be caught. So in the darkness, he just dropped the vessels and started running. But Pawari Baba understood that this thief had come to take away his things, and my presence has disturbed him. So he ran after this thief and said, when he finally managed to catch hold of him, he said, "Oh Lord, I knew not that thou were here. Please take them, they are thine. And pardon me because I disturbed you, because I am thy child." So for him, every action was pre-willed or determined by the Lord himself. Lord himself had come as a thief. So he thought it is a grace that the Lord had decided to, he could be of some use to that Lord who has come as the thief. And later on, you'll be surprised seeing this attitude. The thief who was a criminal got transformed, and later on he became a saint himself. He gave up and it was only because of him that Swami Vivekananda understood the authenticity of this story. Because Swami Vivekananda, he met him much later when Pawari Baba had died. And after that, the thief who was a saint used to live somewhere. And when he told this story to Swami Vivekananda asked him, "Who was that saint who ran after you?" No, he knew. He was telling that there was a thief and Pawari Baba did like this. So Swami Vivekananda was wondering, who is he referring to? And how did you know that a thief tried to rob his possessions and he came and begged forgiveness and said, "Oh Lord, you have come in this form. You didn't allow me to serve you. You please take. You came. I disturbed you." Then Swamiji asked, "Who was that thief? How did you know that this thing happened?" He said, "That thief is me." And Swami Vivekananda was shocked, because he saw that a thief could be transformed by one incident. The genuineness of Pawari Baba and the saintliness which changed the heart. No matter how much police try and people try, it is so difficult to reform a criminal, a thief. But here you see the very idea that he saw God in that thief, totally transformed that thief to give up his evil ways and become a saint. So he says, "I know this because I am that thief." So he says that he heard about another story. She doesn't mention the name, because I think Swami Vivekananda would not have taken his name. He said he was speaking of the same saint when on another occasion a cobra came inside the cave. He was naturally exposed to any animal, or a cobra, a big snake, is so poisonous. At nightfall, he was bitten by that snake accidentally, And at nightfall, somehow he survived because of his power of resistance, because of his God's grace. Somehow he survived the bite of the cobra. Everybody thought he would die. But when he survived, somebody asked him. So naturally, they expected him to say, "My God, what is this? Where did the snake come from?" Then he said, "Oh no, he was a messenger from my beloved, the God, his Ishta." He said, "My Ishta sent me that cobra to bite me. He was a messenger who came to me from the beloved." So these stories, these tales, these uh, in facts or incidents which Swami Vivekananda narrated at that time in this uh, Pimlico, where St. George's Drive, where he was giving a parlor talk, that impacted, that influenced Sister Nivedita, because these were authentic stories of experiences of great spiritual people. And Swami Vivekananda met some people who were witnesses to these events. So that gives an authenticity, that seeing God in everyone is not just a idea, but it is a very practical Vedantic idea, which some people, when they realize the truth of that idea, they really practice it in their life. They really experience in that life. So when Swami Vivekananda asked, "Does God exist?" and Sri Ramakrishna says, "Yes, he exists, but I see him more clearly than you." That means for us, the world is real. It is more real than the spirit. But for Sri Ramakrishna, the spirit was more real. Godhood or that consciousness was more real than the world, which for him perhaps looked like a dream. So that is why when Sri Ramakrishna said, "I have seen God, but seen him in a more clearer way than I see you. I see you as Naren or everybody else in the world I see. But I see you more clearly because I see that divinity shining through you." Just as Pavari Baba saw that divinity shining even in a thief, even in a cobra. So they were so much imbued by that, immersed in that idea, that for them God alone existed and the other things which came. And so that's why that renunciation becomes very natural. The vessels that he possessed, for some people it will be very valuable. It is my vessels, my property, my. But for a person who thinks everything has its source, he sees the divinity everywhere, he does not give much importance to the changing things of the world. That is Vairagya. Temporary things come. If they come, it is fine. As long as he had vessels, he didn't throw them away. But when he felt that the Lord has decided to take away these vessels, he has done it. So that makes us accept everything without likes or dislike. As I mentioned about that old devotee who said, "Things should happen this way or that way is no more in my agenda." So that is the great spiritual progress according to this great devotee, this lady who said, "I don't know what spiritual experiences I had or would like to have. I don't know whether they will make any difference. But the greatest experience, which according to me has made my life peaceful, is that I don't no longer, for the last many years since I practiced spirituality or did, that I never have strong likes and dislikes. I don't want things to go this way." Just as this Pawari Baba, of course, his was extreme. We would not perhaps run after some thieves who have come to steal from us. We will perhaps resist because our knowledge is that it is true also that at our level we have to resist because we are still dependent on all these things. But for him who could live on air, who could live on less food, for him the vessels, if somebody robs it, he doesn't even think. If tomorrow somebody comes and gives him some vessels, he will take it. Till then he will manage without those vessels. As Swami Brahmananji was once meditating. A rich man came and seeing him, he did not want to disturb his meditation, left a very big rug, a very, very costly woolen rug, which was very much necessary. It was extremely cold. But Swami Brahmananji was so absorbed in his meditation that he didn't care. He just was looking at it. Some stranger has come. He wants to give it to me. Okay, fine. And he was just continuing his meditation when suddenly he saw another thief came, and seeing the closed eyes of Brahmananda, he was just slightly aware that somebody has come, and he saw also. But the thief just picked up that blanket, the very costly blanket or woolen uh, sheet, which would have been very useful, and took it away. And there was not, Swami Brahmananji did not even shout at him or did not even show any reaction. He was so disinterested that he said, okay, somebody brought it, kept it. Perhaps the thief needs it and he has taken it. Oh, I am fine. I was without the blanket came and the blanket went away. All this phenomena happened in front of his eyes. But he never bothered to notice it. Said that is the will of the Lord. So how things go on in our life, of course, that is a very difficult state to attain. It is easier said than none, easier said than done. But we should not lose hope. At least a little bit of that, if it comes in our life, then we will not worry too much, will not be anxious. At least for our own mental health, it is necessary. We may not be like Pavari Baba or Swami Brahmananda, that we are immersed in God so much that we do not know what things are going on near us. That is not going to happen till we become Brahmaganis. But before that also, if we develop that attitude of allowing things to happen, the right thing will happen at the right time. It will save us a lot of anxiety and worry. If we don't want things to go this way or that way, things are happening, things will happen. We have to work. For that reason, we should not sit quietly. We have to do things, what comes to our mind, we have to try to do those things. But if they happen, think it is a blessing of God that the Lord wants that thing to happen. And it has happened at the right time. Maybe it has not happened till now, but now it has happened. So it is good for me. Tomorrow, if something doesn't happen which we want to happen, then we have to remember even that is good. Maybe somebody else has taken a decision on our behalf. And if we consider that I don't really assert myself, I just express my wish or desire. If it happens, well and good. If it doesn't happen, maybe better things will happen. So that is what Swami Vivekananda conveyed through this story and showed that true practical Vedanta, or Vedanta, which if it is properly understood, and this idea was new to Nivedita, was a sort of aggressive lady. Perhaps she was taught that you have to make things happen. You have to run that rat race. You have to involve yourself in politics and activism and all those things. But what is true surrender? That her guru taught her. So she says, Swami himself explained that through a wonderful metaphor. And I will conclude with this in 5 minutes. The wonderful metaphor he told, because Sister Nivedita had not seen a mirage in a desert. Of course, there's no desert in the UK. So I don't think she must have physically seen. She might have read about a desert. And in those days, there were no movies. So perhaps she could not have, maybe just in pictures, somebody would have painted the desert. But it's a different thing to be in a desert and to see a picture or read a book on the desert. So she says, Swami Vivekananda was telling a beautiful story or a beautiful incident from his own life. It was a metaphor he was giving to explain the idea of Maya. So he says he was walking very thirsty, he was carrying some water, but he was very tired because he was walking in the desert. And on both sides, he saw the vast expanse of water. So he was not worried. If the water gets exhausted, I will just go and fill my water bottle with that. So he was carrying that kamandalu, and he had enough water. Now and then on the way, perhaps there would be some place where he could fill it. Then he used to continuously walk for miles and miles together. When he was in Gujarat, when he was passing through the desert to go to Narayan Sarovar, that is where he first saw. Narayan Sarovar is a very dry, it's a, it is known as the mini Sahara. It's a smaller run of Kutch. There is a great run, there is a small run. Run means desert. So in that small desert, he was passing through. And for 15 days he was passing through. He always thought that there is water. But now he had been thirsty. His water was exhausted. He went and saw, the nearer he goes to that mirage, the water seemed to be receding. So the mirage is an illusion which is created by the heat on the sand. When the sand heats the air above it, it reflects the light and the sky is reflected in that. And you get a blue tinge which covers the sand, and you appear as if it is water. So then he says, when I went near, just like Maya, when you try to understand what Maya is, suddenly, and uh, when she decides, when you are forced to go towards the mirage suddenly vanishes. So when we are under the influence of Maya, we are troubled, we have sorrow. But when we go a bit deeper and try to find out, and by the grace of the Divine Mother or grace of Shakti, when we understand, try to understand a little bit what Maya does to us, how it binds us. There are some people who, as Sri Ramakrishna said, never get bound. They are like slippery fish. No matter you catch them, they just simply seem to slip. So Maya cannot catch them. So also in the desert, the moment he went near, then he understood it is futile to run after this mirage. No matter how much I go towards the water, it seems to be receding from you. There's only sand and sand everywhere. So let me stick to the road. And then he knew that it would be false. He knew it is false and it would be futile to run after it. So Sister Nivedita says, all the experience to which such achievements had been possible, the philosophy that could draw some parallel between his journey in desert and life, was the education that I received from him. That is what she believes. So through such parables, through such metaphors, which he explained very intricate concepts of Maya and how to compare a desert to our life. Our life is like a desert. We are running after this ephemeral things, things which really do not exist, but they are tempting enough to make us run after them. And one fine day we die, we have to suffer because we went after the mirage, thinking that there is water, and finally we did not get that water and we die of thirst. So that simile between the desert and our own life was what Swami Vivekananda taught Sister Nivedita in that parlor meeting. So these are the few things which she said, I learned from Swami Vivekananda. These were new stories, new metaphors. That is how he molded me. And the third element, we will come to it in our next class. We have a gospel class now. So those of you, they can attend the Skype session, though it is on Skype, not on Zoom. But if you like, you can attend. The Scotland devotees, they have been doing it for a long time, so I didn't want to stop it. It's just once in a month. So though And as I told you, I don't mind, because people say that listening is very easy, and you have to talk, you have to prepare. In fact, I don't agree with it. Listening is more difficult than talking about these things, because I enjoy it. Whereas if you don't enjoy it, then, or perhaps if somebody doesn't deserve it, he doesn't get a chance to listen. So everything has the right time. Listening is not easy, let me tell you, because if you don't have the desire to know, if you don't have the desire to understand what the spirit is, then either you will not get an opportunity, which you can say that many people want to listen, but somehow they don't get an opportunity. And some people somehow seem to be pushed, as Sri Ramakrishna used to say, some people voluntarily jump into the Ganga, they get wet. But some people are pushed into the Ganga. They are the lucky ones, because they don't make that choice, but they are pushed by somebody, like somebody who brought Master Mahashay to Sri Ramakrishna. He never visited Sri Ramakrishna again. And Master Mahashay was about to commit suicide. His life was saved by the wonderful ideas of Sri Ramakrishna. So now you see, the person who suggested never ever in his life visited that place again. So if you are not destined, if we are not destined to immerse ourselves in these ideas, it will never happen. It will never happen. Let me, from experience, I am telling you, no matter how much you plan, somehow this mirage of which we see in the desert will make us water more real. We'll run after that water. 100 people may tell you that is water, don't go there, don't waste your time, you will die of thirst, but we will not do it. But if we are destined to understand that this is a mirage, then we will walk our way. We will not be distracted by that mirage. So I'll conclude today. I don't think we have time for question answer. I have to again start the gospel class, because most of the people who attend the gospel class, they think it is, perhaps they may not listen to both the classes. So anyway, whoever deserves to hear whichever class, they will hear, get some idea. But at least I feel blessed that I am able to speak about these wonderful ideas. It at least helps me, if nobody else. So anyway, there is one question, very quickly I'll answer. How do we balance the two ideas? Everything happens by God's will, so we have to accept it. But then we have to act in some situations. How to determine what the extent and method of action should be? You see, the idea is that don't confuse that you should not act. I told you very clearly when I said, don't interpret this as saying that we have to do nothing. The Gita idea is karmanne vadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. He doesn't say don't act. You have to act. Karmani adhikara, you have the right to act and you should act. So in not some situations, in all situations we have to act. So there's not that in this situation I will renounce. That is what Arjuna was trying to do. He was wanting to fight a war, but when he saw something happen to him and then he did not want to act. That is not what Sri Krishna is saying. We have to act. But then we should not think that the war will be won or we'll lose it. We may win it, we may lose it, we may die, we may live. Not expecting or not bothering about the results, go on doing your work. That is what I said. Definitely the idea that everything happens by God's will, so I'll do nothing. That is totally wrong. I have to do what I think is right in that situation according to Dharma. And if certain things happen this way or that way, you should not bother. That is the idea. Karmani va adhikaraste na phaleshu. Phaleshu means the fruits. You may get a fruit, keep on trying, go on doing the actions. Today or tomorrow, you may get the fruit or you may not get it if it is good for you. You depend on God for that. Leave the result to Him, but you do your best. That is the idea. So please don't confuse it or even think that you should not act. You should, everyone should act. So I'll take your leave now. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. So I have to attend a class in 5 more minutes. So I need some rest just to